if you're not familiar with video conventions and tools, grab a video tool, grab your favorite movie, and see if you can reenact some of the scenes using the same cuts and elements that drew your attention.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are or wherever you're watching from. My name is Matt Pierce, host of Visual Lounge. Today, we're going to be talking about action first learning. So we're going to get into what that is, but it's going to be exciting and it's going to help you to start thinking about how you can apply some things into your learning process, into your teaching process a little bit better, a little bit, more approachable, I think. We've got Dr. Karl Kapp here talking to us about that process. So let me go ahead and introduce him. Dr. Karl Kapp is a professor of instructional technology at Bloomsburg University and a leading expert in learning design and interactive instruction. He's the author of Action First Learning and Learning in 3D and speaks globally on creating meaningful engagement-driven learning experiences. Through his research, writing, and consulting, Dr. Kapp helps organizations move beyond content delivery to real-world application and impact. And with that said, please help me welcome Dr. Karl Kapp to the Visual Lounge. Well, Karl, what I want to start off is where we always start off. And what's one tip or visual idea about using images or videos that you would give us about using them in learning?
So yeah, one of the things that I think is really effective is to use it to show people's cognition or what people are thinking. So I always call it the reality TV show technique, but basically where they show somebody doing, like Jersey Shore, they show somebody doing something like really stupid, and then they explain why they're doing it. But from a learning perspective, we can show somebody doing something really effective, like maybe in a sales meeting, bringing up maybe a product feature or functionality, and then cutting to this video insert of them explaining, well, the reason why I use this approach was because of this. And I think that's a really great approach to grab people's attention and to help make the unseeable, the thinking process, more seeable and more tangible.
Well, I love that as an approach because you're right. There's things that we say or show that are these good steps, but the reasons behind it, or maybe the thought process that was happening, because someone might have really good thought process. But it was a bad decision, right? And so, so I love that as an approach.
Yeah, or they may do something that looks like super simple and super easy, and then you're like, oh, well, that's simple. I could do that. And you're like, oh, no, I can't do that because I didn't think about this or think about that. It's kind of, there's an old joke, I think, somewhere where, this machine's not working and they call this guy comes in and he looks at the machine for 15 minutes and he knocks on the machine and it starts right back up. And the guy goes, send me an invoice. He sends him an invoice for $20,000. And the guy's like, what do you mean $20,000? I want an itemized invoice. That's ridiculous, $20,000. And the guy goes, okay, $1,000 for the knock, $19,000 because I know where to knock. So that's the idea. So if we could see how somebody's thinking, you can accelerate the training and accelerate their expertise.
Well, I love that. And I have a feeling this is going to play into our topic today because we're going to talk about action first learning. Why don't we start off high level? Because I know you have a book and we're not trying to recreate everything that's in the book, but high level, what is action first learning? What does that mean?
Yeah, so action first learning basically came about, there's activity-based learning, which is good, but action first learning takes it to another level where we start our learning experience with an action or activity, because it sets the mood and the mode for the learning to take place. If you're in a classroom and you lecture for like an hour and a half, then you say, okay, everybody, let's do an activity. You get, I'm not gonna, lots of moans and groans. But if you start with action, then you do activity after activity meaningfully, it sparks something and keeps the energy going. And so it's basically a philosophy of designing, developing, and delivering instruction, whether it's online or face-to-face, because you can definitely do it online as well, where the learner takes action right away. They may not even have full knowledge because we know from Malcolm Knowles, a learning theorist, that adult learners learn best when they know they don't know something. So even if they kind of already know the subject, or don't know the subject, you may want to throw them in that and go, okay, I don't know this. Oh, okay, now I'm more open to learning than if I'm not. So it's a philosophical approach that starts with kind of a trigger, like, okay, here's something like a question or a problem or a situation. Then the application of their knowledge occurs. If they don't know something, then the learning occurs. And then at the end, it includes reflection, because to me, there's no learning without reflection. It's just an experience. And so if we want really somebody to have a learning experience, they need to reflect on it. And unfortunately, we're not the best reflectors ever. So we need some coaching and some help and some assistance with that.
Okay, so I love this approach, and I love the idea of getting people in there, but it is inevitable that, and probably in most experiences, right? People don't know the thing that you want them to know. Like if I'm in a corporate environment, and I don't know if it's whether it's using a tool or a process or something like that. Obviously, we're probably providing some training because there's an unknown, like they just don't know. I gotta imagine that in that process, particularly in adult learning, there's this idea. I feel like we don't want people to fail. We don't want them to get caught up in like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I don't know what to do, because there's maybe a stigmatism of around that. It just feels like that could be a barrier. So from that action first learning approach, how do you address that? Like if I was going to put this in practice in my office, what kind of things should I be thinking about to, one, maybe not make sure, one, I don't want people to feel like they're failing, but I want them to realize they don't know, because as you said, if I realize they don't know something, I'm probably more open to learning, right? I can,
Right.
I'm not
Yeah.
going
So
to
that's a
ignore it.
good. Right. Yeah, that's a really good question. So one simple way is to do that online, like when we do online instruction. And I go back to my all my research and work on games, because if you think about most games, what they'll do is they'll allow you to start the game at, like, let's say, expert mode, and you start playing at expert mode and you're like, oh man, I'm not going anywhere, this is horrible. And so then you come back to the middle mode, right? And if it's the first time you play the game, maybe you can survive at middle mode, but maybe you can't. Then you come down to easy mode, and then you're accomplishing what's in the game. So one way to do it online is to provide different levels of entry into the content or experience. Another way to do that is think about online help. So some online help, like you're trying to solve a problem, let's say you can't solve it. The first level of help might be kind of fairly vague, like, oh, perhaps you should look at the connections between the items. You're like, oh, okay. Um, yeah, I'm not getting that. So then maybe you go to the next one, and the next one's on the left-hand side of the machine, there are two items that need to be connected. Okay, maybe you still don't get that. Then it's the third level of help is, okay, see that yellow thing and the blue thing, connect them like this, right? And so that's the third level of help. So one of the ways that we can do that to help mitigate it is, um, if I get super frustrated, I would go to the third level of help. But if I'm still going like, I think I can get this, maybe I'd go to the second level or first level. So that's one way to mitigate it. The other way to mitigate it, which is really interesting, speaking of games, is people are more willing to fail in a game situation than they are typically in a learning situation, because they understand that games have failures and that's okay. I always talk about game. You're going to fail. It's okay to fail in a game because you have 3 lives to start with. So, hey, I can mess up twice, no big deal. So even in a classroom situation, you can set it up, say, hey, this is kind of a game environment. We've got 3 chances to do this, or 4 chances, or 5, how many you want to set it up. And those chances and making it more game like kind of reduces that stress, that fear of failure, and allows people to experiment and explore a little bit more than they normally would.
Yeah. So, well, I love that as a fan of games, role playing games, board games, less video games, but still, as a fan of games, that makes a lot of sense. That kind of creates an environment that there's an expectation, right? That hey, you don't know everything. Although that should be life, but we're not here to
Yeah, right.
philosophize about life. So I love that, but it does seem like, are there areas or types of learning? Maybe not types of learning even, but kind of like times when this works better than others, because it does seem like maybe there's things you just need to tell somebody. But are there, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
like connecting two things? Is there an ideal time for action based learning?
Well, so if you think about, if the learners have absolutely positively no knowledge of the uh, situation, then action first learning probably isn't the best. How, having said that, however, like, let's say that you're teaching a new piece of software. Most people have used software in some way or another, and so a lot of people can suss out kind of, oh, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that, and then get stuck. So even if there's no knowledge of that software at all, sometimes it can be helpful. It's not as so. This is the quagmire people get into. They say, well, if we just let people try stuff out, then they're not going to learn it, and what's going to happen is, um, it's better and faster if I just dictate everything to them.
Mm.
We falsely believe that that means that they'll learn from that. And not necessarily. We've all been in instructional situations where somebody has lectured to us about what we're supposed to do, and then afterwards we're like, what are we supposed to do? Do you know what we're supposed to? I don't know what we're supposed to do. I thought they said that. I don't know, right? But if you actually work and figure it out together, then it can be more helpful. But obviously, all instructional strategies have to take into account who the learners are, what the level of their sophistication, the sophistication of the knowledge, and what we want to try to accomplish. But the reason why I wrote the book and I'm so passionate about it is because we've totally erred on the wrong side, which is, okay, everything needs to be taught by a lecture. So we're going to lecture, we're going to tell you, or you're going to read about this, and maybe you'll have the experience later on, maybe you won't, maybe you'll practice your skills, maybe you won't. um, I always think about you know take sports figures who practice all the time. So Tom Brady, for example. So I'm a Steelers fan, so when he played for the Patriots, I could not like Tom Brady at all, but once he went to the Bucs, I'm like, okay, fine, I can root for Tom Brady. um, he practiced football every day. He was the first one at the stadium. He was the last one to leave. My goodness, I don't know anybody who could know more football than Tom Brady, but he practiced all the time. That's what made him so good. But we've got people in companies. Yeah, I've been a salesperson for 10 years. I know everything about sales. I don't need any practice, right? I don't need, you are practicing. You're practicing on potential customers every single day. Sometimes you get it right. Sometimes you don't. Oh, I'm in insurance. I don't need any practice looking at claims. Well, sometimes you get the claims right. Sometimes you get them wrong. So the idea that we don't need to practice or we don't need this experience, I think hurts organizations more than they even realize. And when that happens, the customers pay the price, and ultimately the company pays the price as well. So it's valuable to have that kind of experience and to implement action first learning as opposed to 100% didactic. But it's never a solution. A nuanced solution is never like all action first learning or all. It's really somewhere in the middle, and that's the job of us as smart designers of instruction to figure out where that needs to be.
Yeah, well, and I love the realization that we're probably not doing enough practice, right? Building in that opportunity, and I think that ties to reflection too. You mentioned that earlier, and I'm curious. As let's say someone's trying to apply this, and obviously they need to go read your book to get the full context, and I don't want to assume that they're going to be able to just do it based on this podcast, but let's say we set some up, kind of maybe it's a gamification, a little bit opportunity for them to, let's take the sales training example. They get in a situation, they have to kind of work their way through that. They get some then further instruction. From a reflection standpoint, being that it's so important, how do we structure reflection better to tie all those things that you just talked about to be maybe more solidified? I don't know if it's maybe a memory thing or if it's more of a making connections type thing. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, the first fault that I see. Well, second of all, let me back up even more. Yeah, so if they listen to this podcast, try to apply action first learning, and then go get the book, that's the right way to do it, right? So take
Right.
action,
Yeah.
see if you could do it, and then if you can and get stumble, get the book. But so what happens is, first of all, lots of learning. Um, there's tons of learning situations where there's no reflection at all, right? Okay, thanks for coming to class, or
Mm-hmm.
congratulations, you passed the final 10-point quiz at the end of this e-learning module, which you hit next to continue as fast as you possibly could. So that means that there's not a lot of that built in. So the very first thing, very simple thing we could do is force reflection. Okay, before you enter this module, let me ask a couple questions about, how do you think you might apply this in the future? So that's one question, the future application. asking them what roadblocks they think they're going to encounter implementing this. So now they have to think through it and think through possible obstacles. You could ask, what kind of modifications would you make to this instruction to make it work in your work environment? So that's important. It would be really helpful if you could get the managers involved. So if you could send them an email like, "Hey, Matt just went to this training on such and such and such and such. When he comes back to the office, ask him these questions.
Mm.
Matt, what did you learn that you're going to apply today, and what were the difficulties in what you were, those kind of things can help Matt become better at applying and reflecting on what's happening. Giving people the opportunity to journal and then giving them good old fashioned prompts, not e-learning prompts, but good old fashioned prompts about, okay, you had this learning experience. How does this relate to other learning experiences you've had? And the reason why we need to prompt and help people to think about that is a couple of reasons. One is, I mean, I went to college, years of schooling. Very little of that time was ever said, "Oh, Carl, here's how you reflect on your learning." Like, "Oh, when does that happen?" Like, almost never. So we're not trained to do that. We're not prepared to do that. Second is, especially in this environment, everything's so busy and hectic that okay, once you're done with training, you're right into something else. And if it's online, you're probably doing training in the background while you're responding to emails or something like that. So that you don't have the time to reflect either. So having that built in, oh, here's 3 questions you need to do. One time we did this really cool game. It was called Zombie Sales Apocalypse. It was an online game. It was so much fun. It was really cool for a pharma company. And at the end of that game, to get the reps who played the game to reflect, we had a reporter at the end of the game said, "Wow, it was really tough in there with all those zombies. Let me ask you a few questions." And it was just a way within the flow of the story to get them to reflect on the learning that occurred. And if we can encourage learners to reflect, we can then help them become better learners and build their reflection skills. And so that's why, some people have like 2 people have 10 years of experience. One person leverages that experience and does great things. The other person, they just can't get past this ceiling. The reason why a lot of times is that this person is not reflecting and learning those lessons so that they can do better, in the 11th year. And that's what we want to kind of encourage as we go through that process.
Well, you're giving me some ideas. I think about, we speak at conferences a lot, and I see you at a variety of conferences. I'm thinking, man, I need to have something set up so people can reflect after my sessions to learn better. And I want to get to talk about images, but I want to just real quick on reflection. How is there a timing issue? Like, should reflection happen like really close to the experience of learning, or is there some space that is okay? Because I'm thinking about that email to the manager, right? Like, if it's a day or two later, is that as effective, or should it be like, I've learned, I've gone through this experience, and now I've reflected, or maybe it's even something we should be doing multiple times?
Yeah. So answer B. So we should definitely be doing it multiple times. So after you have an experience, like one of the things I like to do is for my students, I'll teach a class, and then the next day is a quiz on what we covered in class. So, not coming up or whatever. Or you could do a pop quiz before class. As actually turns out, from research perspective, quizzes are like a really good tool for
Hmm.
reflection. We don't like them, and yeah, yuck, but they actually are really powerful. Um, but if we want to continue the knowledge and continue the reflection, then we do want to do it at intervals. So one interval would be closely after the learning experience. Another might be a week later, and then maybe a month later, and then repeat that maybe every quarter if you really want the reflection and the learning to stick. And then the other thing that we should do is, teach the managers, teach everyone to reflect, so that the managers reflect, so that it's no longer like, okay, Carl, you had this experience, now you need to sit down and reflect. It's, hey, I had this experience. How can I apply this to what I do in the future? Or how can I apply this to another client? And to get me into the model of that reflection, or the mode of reflecting, is a really important element. So I think right after an experience, maybe a week after the experience, and then a month, and then quarterly is probably an ideal situation. We have to be a little bit careful as designers of learning. We know space practice works and space retrieval works, but if you do that for every single class, then every day your first 7 hours or you can't do that. Like nudges to do that. So we have to be a little strategic about it. But if we could teach the person to do it themselves, kind of like metacognition, right? If you think about your own thinking and think how you think, then you're going to be better at thinking and solving problems and recognizing your own shortcomings. Same thing with reflection. If you could think about how you reflect, what you should reflect upon, and then how to apply that reflection, you're going to be a better learner, better contributor, etc.
Oh, I love that. So, I want to make sure we leave just enough time here before we move into our speedrun questions. So, one of the things we haven't talked about in this conversation, and I think you've laid out some awesome ideas that apply to so many different types of kind of approaches to learning. What role have you found that using images or video can play in action first learning? It seems like there's lots of ways you could use it, but I'm curious from you as the expert here, what would you suggest?
Yeah. So one of the chapters in the book is about instructional comics, and it's one of my favorite chapters in the book. And I didn't write it; Kevin Thorne wrote it, but he based it on his dissertation and the research he did about how effective it is to use digital comics and interactive comics. And so, using those kind of elements for imagery can be really important because one is a comic is an abstraction of reality. So you can focus on what's really important, and you can add layers of reality on top of it. So, for example, if I showed you an image of a character sitting in the corner with a dark cloud over their head, you would right away know, oh, okay, maybe they're sad or maybe they're angry or whatever. You get it right away. I don't have to spend a lot of words telling you, this person's sitting in the corner and they're that kind of stuff. So that's one area where I think images can be very effective, and also research. There's some really interesting research about adult coloring of images and how effective that is for focus and creativity, which I think
Mm.
is really interesting. There's been a bunch of studies, really interesting studies about people with anxiety and how coloring calms them down and puts them not really in a flow state, but in more a calmer state. We know that being calm is a condition that is helpful from a learning perspective. So using the images that way can help. But then the other thing is that images, a well developed image can give you the message right away. So we have symbols that we use. So for example, if I say, okay, there's a red circle with a red line through it, on top of bare feet. Well, right away, no bare feet, right?
Hmm.
So I don't have to explain it to you. I don't have to do anything like that. So images provide that kind of powerful element. And then video is what I think is so interesting about it is the whole vocabulary around video that we don't even realize we have. So an example of that is, and I think a great example is Wayne's World. So when you watch Wayne's World, you have Wayne and Garth, and what do they do to go back in time, right? They go brrr, brrr, and they wiggle the screen. But that's a convention that we all know. Every time you watch a movie and you see that happen, you're going back in time, right? And so no one has to explain that to you. It just kind of happens. Or if you want to show somebody really contemplating or frustrating, you zoom in on them, right? You zoom in because you show that they're really concentrating or really frustrated. And those types of visual cues, I think, are not used enough in learning and development, partly because it used to be that you had to be like, Steven Spielberg to create like a video. Like you don't have to anymore. The tools are right there. YouTube did a great thing because I remember professional video, training videos always had to be like the highest quality ever. And
Hmm.
now you have like YouTube, but one of the things I think that we're missing, and the sad part is tools like Camtasia and other tools have that ability in it. You can add those kind of special effects, but people just aren't versed enough in them. So I think one of the things that you can really do to expand the use, the storytelling and the effectiveness of video is to leverage those conventions that we already have to help tell the video story.
Well, I love that the language of imagery, right? And you mentioned with the comic books as the cloud, and I think there is this whole vocabulary and it's a skill to develop, and you have to learn it and watch for it. And I think I think it's incredible what you're saying, because I often talk to people about using video and the things that we can learn, particularly short form video creators, right? They're using this language in a, not this really formal way, but they are doing it in a way that helps you to convey so much information. So I love this. I'm excited. I've got some things to go back and try, some things to do. I'm sure listeners will as well. But Karl, like I said, I love games. And because of that, we've got some dice to roll. So we're going to move into our speed round, which is quick, fast questions with quick, fast answers. So here we go. All right. The dice tower is if the button. Come on. There we go. Okay. So we're going to roll the die. 12-sided die, Karl. And question number 8 to start with is, where do you turn for inspiration? So you write lots of books. You do lots of teaching. What's one of the wells you go to?
So for Action First Learning, the well was Action Comics. So I do go to comic books to get ideas, inspiration, and themes.
I love that. Action First Comics, and is there a favorite? I'm going to go off script here. Is there a favorite comic that you read?
Well, my favorite superhero for the longest time was Batman Detective series. So, the brooding kind of silent Batman. So yeah, that's my favorite.
Okay, so I'm waiting for the Karl Kapp Batman edition of any book. So, all right, well, let's go on to our next question. And it's going to be question number 5, which is, if you could acquire instantly any new skill, what would it be and why? So you've given the gift of a new skill. What would you do?
Language. I would love to be able to speak multiple languages. So I can only speak one language, but it would be fantastic if I could speak many, many languages.
I love it. And very practical, because you could do a lot with that. That'd be cool. All right, let's do one more dice roll here. Oh, can't do duplicates. It's funny. How many times I've done this show, I very rarely roll duplicates, and now it's 2 episodes in a row that we've gotten some. So, all right, the last question is number 2 here. If you could travel anywhere in the world right now using your new gifted language skills, where would you go and why?
Wow, that's a great question. So I've never been to Japan. So I think it would be really interesting to go to Japan, because it, like Tokyo, especially because it's so kinetic and so energetic, but a different culture. And so I think that would be kind of really interesting for me, and I think it would be a lot of fun.
I think it would be amazing. And thank you for sharing those answers. Karl, as we wrap up the show, obviously you've got a lot to offer people. If they want to connect with you or learn more, where should they go?
So probably the best place is to reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's just, look up Karl Kapp. Please let me know that, hey, I listened to the podcast and, because I get so many, it's amazing the number of unsolicited, it looks like a real reach out, but it's actually, I'm going to sell you something. And then YouTube, I put a lot of, especially Action First Learning. I'm Karl Kapp on YouTube. You could look at me, or at Prof Kapp 01. And I have a lot of videos on there about Action First Learning. So that's a good place to look up. And then, of course, I'm going to be at DevLearn, and, I'm usually at ATD and, all those kind of places. And so those are another place that you can look me up. But seriously, if you want to find anything, just, Google Karl Kapp, you'll find information. I have a newsletter on LinkedIn called L&D Easter Eggs, which I have a lot of fun with that, where I bring research and kind of hopefully aha moments to L&D and things that we didn't know. I did a whole cool thing on how the Wolverine Deadpool movie is a new way of thinking about learning and development. So, those kinds of thoughts, they may be off-center thought. It might not be like, what is he talking about? But anyway, it's always a fun, enjoyable kind of experience.
I love it. And we'll make sure we get some links in the description so you can go find those quick and easily. Well, Dr. Kopp, we like to wrap the show up the same way every single time, and we ask people for their final take. So what is your final take?
So my final take is, if you're not familiar with video conventions and tools, grab a video tool, grab your favorite movie, and see if you can reenact some of the scenes using the same cuts and elements that drew your attention.
I love that. And that is one of my favorite things to try to do. I had somebody once reach out to me, they wanted a stamp, like, you know how you put a stamp down? They wanted they wanted to say WTF, but they wanted this effect for the stamp. And I thought, can I make that? I got close. I got really, really close. It was pretty good. So, well, Dr. Kopp, thank you so much for joining us here in the Visual Lounge. Always appreciate your insights and thoughts, and love to be able to chat with you.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. All right, everybody, go check out Dr. Kopp's books. Go. Lots of great information out there, whether you're interested in the action first learning, you're interested in gamification. He's got a lot there that you can read. Also, check out the YouTube channel and all that. But what I hope is that as you're walking away from this podcast, or as you're finished listening, that you're thinking about, hey, how do we implement things a little bit differently and better that really impact learning? We're not just focused on like delivery of content. In recording several of these podcasts, it's a theme I'm starting here, is like, we can't just deliver more content. We got to make sure it's good content. It's the right content in the right time and the right place. And we're doing these practices to help people. So with that said, of course, we like to make sure that you're getting the best opportunities that you can to continue to learn. And we encourage you to level up every single day. Thanks, everybody.